July 2, 1943. Castel Vatrino Airfield, Sicily. The pilot of a Fowler-Wolf 190 had no warning of the P-40 Warhawk diving from above until bullets tore through his fuselage, sending his plane spiraling toward the Sicilian countryside below. 22-year-old First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall, from Brazil, Indiana, had just achieved what German Luftwaffe commanders considered impossible. A black pilot had shot down one of their elite fighters. The swastika painted on Hall's P-40L Warhawk that afternoon marked the first of 112 enemy aircraft destroyed by the men the Germans would later nickname Schwarze the Black Birdmen. In Nazi ideology, black people were deemed Untermensch, subhuman, incapable of handling complex machinery or showing courage in combat. The Nuremberg laws forbade marriages between Germans and people of African descent. Yet, high above the Mediterranean, that doctrine was about to collide violently with reality. In time, 992 pilots trained at Tuskegee, Alabama, would systematically dismantle both German aircraft and the assumptions behind Nazi racial superiority. The Luftwaffe had no idea that in 1943 they would face some of the most rigorously trained, intensely motivated fighter pilots in the entire U.S. Army Air Forces, men who had overcome obstacles their white counterparts never did, who trained harder and longer than standard pilots, and who carried into battle not only national duty but the weight of proving the abilities of an entire race. Soon, the numbers of aerial combat would speak for themselves: 15,000 sorties, 1,578 missions, 112 enemy planes destroyed, and bomber escort losses far lower than those of white fighter units. Statistics that would force even the most fanatical Nazis to confront the collapse of their racial assumptions. The journey to that first aerial victory began far from combat, in the segregated environment of the United States. In 1925, the U.S. Army War College published Employment of Negro Manpower in War, stating, "Compared to the white man, he is admittedly of inferior mentality. He is inherently weak in character." Black soldiers were officially deemed unfit for technical roles or combat leadership. Yet, even amid these prejudices, some black Americans were already proving otherwise. Eugene Bullard flew for France in World War I because the U.S. refused him service. Bessie Coleman earned her pilot's license in France in 1921, after every American flight school rejected her. By the 1930s, the Coffey School of Aeronautics in Chicago trained dozens of black civilian pilots, proving that skill in the air transcended race. As war loomed over Europe, pressure for change grew. Civil rights leaders such as Walter White of the NAACP, labor leader A. Philip Randolph, and Judge William H. Hastie campaigned relentlessly for black inclusion in military aviation. Black newspapers, the Chicago Defender, the Pittsburgh Courier, and the Baltimore Afro-American, challenged the Roosevelt administration with a clear question: how could America fight for democracy abroad while denying it at home? On April 3, 1939, Public Law 18 opened the door slightly. Senator Harry H. Schwartz added an amendment requiring the civilian pilot training program to designate one or more schools for training black pilots. It was a reluctant, segregated concession, but a start. When Roosevelt ran for an unprecedented third term in 1940, he relied on black votes in key northern cities. On January 16, 1941, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson announced the creation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, an all-black flying unit, noting it would be an experiment to determine if black pilots could be trained for combat. Captain Benjamin O. Davis Jr. understood the stakes when he led 26 pilots of the 99th Fighter Squadron to North Africa in April 1943. Son of America's first black general, Davis endured 4 years of near-total isolation at West Point, where white cadets would not speak to him outside official duties. Now, he commanded men who bore not only their own hopes but the aspirations of 13 million black Americans. The 99th joined the 33rd Fighter Group at Farhona, Tunisia, under Colonel William W. Momeyer, who openly doubted black pilots. He gave them patrol missions over the Mediterranean, away from key action, expecting them to fail. When they did not immediately excel, he found his excuse. Their first combat mission came on June 2, 1943, an attack on the Italian-held island of Pantelleria. As their worn P-40 Warhawks climbed toward the target, German fighters appeared. The Tuskegee pilots held formation, protecting the bombers. No planes were lost on either side, but the Germans learned a crucial lesson: these pilots would not break under pressure. Then came July 2, 1943, a day that changed everything. Charles Hall was on his 8th mission, escorting B-25 Mitchell bombers attacking Castelvetrino airfield in Sicily. 2 Fowler-Wolf 190s dove down toward the bomber formation. Hall later recalled, "I saw 2 Fowler-Wolves following the bombers just after the bombs were dropped. I maneuvered into the space between the fighters and bombers and managed to turn inside the enemy aircraft. I fired a long burst and saw my tracers hit the second plane. It started turning left but then suddenly dropped and went straight to the ground." When Hall returned to base, the airfield erupted in celebration. Black ground crews, who had endured months of insults from white personnel, finally saw a historic answer to every slight. Hall's victory was the first aerial kill by a black American pilot in U.S. military history. By January 1944, the 99th Fighter Squadron had been in combat for 7 months, yet Colonel Meyer filed a scathing report claiming the unit lacked aggressiveness and recommending their removal from action. The report reached General Henry Hap Arnold, who considered shutting down the experiment. Then came Anzio. On January 27, 1944, the Luftwaffe launched massive raids against Allied forces at the Anzio beachhead. 15 pilots of the 99th, flying outdated P-40s, encountered superior Fowler-Wolf 190s over the battlefield. What followed would silence all critics. Over 2 days, the 99th shot down multiple enemy planes. Sources vary between 8 and 13 victories. Captain Charles Hall claimed 2 more kills, bringing his total to 3. In just 2 days, flying inferior aircraft, they destroyed more enemy planes than they had in the previous 7 months of combat. The War Department launched a study comparing the 99th to other P-40 squadrons, and concluded that their performance matched that of white units. Anzio proved decisively that black pilots could excel in combat when given the opportunity. In May 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group was formed, merging the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd Fighter Squadrons. They received orders that would turn them from outcasts into legends. Assigned to the 15th Air Force as bomber escorts, they faced long, perilous missions deep into Nazi Germany. At Ramitelli Airfield on Italy's Adriatic coast, Colonel Benjamin Davis addressed his pilots. "We cannot afford to lose bombers. Our job is not to be aces. Our job is to bring those bombers home." This philosophy became their guiding principle: stay with the bombers at all costs. In June 1944, General Nathan Twining instituted a color coding system for fighter groups, assigning distinctive colors for immediate recognition. The 332nd received red, not just red nose or tail bands, but entire tail sections painted crimson. The P-51 Mustangs, with red tails, red propeller spinners, and red nose bands, became instantly recognizable. The first bomber crews to receive red tail escorts did not know their protectors were black. They only knew these fighters remained close, never abandoning the bombers for easier kills. Word spread quickly: request the red tails if you can. July 18, 1944 would put the red tails to their ultimate test. Colonel Davis led 66 Mustangs to rendezvous with bombers targeting the Luftwaffe base at Memmingen, Germany. The bombers were delayed, and Davis made a critical decision: orbit in enemy territory rather than return to base. When the bombers finally appeared, roughly 100 German fighters attacked from multiple directions. The Luftwaffe believed overwhelming numbers could break the Red Tail's protective screen. Despite fierce resistance, the 332nd claimed 11 to 12 enemy victories. 15 B-17s were lost in 20 minutes of brutal combat, and the 332nd lost 3 pilots, Lieutenants Robert Hutton, Wellington Irving, and Alfred Brown. Critics argued that these bomber losses proved black pilots could not handle major battles. But operational analysis revealed the truth. The 332nd had faced an impossible situation, engaging superior German forces and still prevented total disaster. By March 1945, conventional Luftwaffe fighters could barely challenge Allied air supremacy. Yet Germany had one final weapon, the Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter, capable of speeds up to 540 miles per hour, faster than any propeller-driven aircraft. On March 24, 1945, the 332nd received their most daunting mission: escort bombers on a 1,600-mile round trip to Berlin to attack Daimler-Benz tank factories. Intelligence reported that Me-262s from Jägerschwader 7 would defend the target. Colonel Davis led 43 P-51 Mustangs into the heart of the Reich. As they neared Berlin, the largest jet fighter force ever assembled for a single interception appeared. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown, who had studied the jet's weaknesses, explained, "We knew the German jets were faster than us. Instead of chasing them directly, we maneuvered away and turned into their blind spots." Brown shot down one Me-262, later reporting, "I pulled up at him in a 15-degree climb, fired 3 long bursts from 2,000 feet at 8 o'clock, and almost immediately the pilot bailed out from around 24,500 feet. Lieutenant Earl Lane achieved what many considered impossible, shooting down a Me-262 with a 2,000-yard deflection shot using the new K-14 computing gun sight. Lieutenant Charles Brantley claimed a third jet victory that day. In a single engagement, the Red Tails destroyed more Me-262s than most fighter groups managed over the entire war. The Red Tails had just surpassed all previous American Me-262 kills in one afternoon. The 332nd Fighter Group earned a Distinguished Unit Citation for this mission. Yet not every encounter between the Tuskegee Airmen and German forces ended in triumph. 32 pilots became prisoners of war, their experiences revealing the complex intersection of Nazi ideology and military reality. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson was shot down on August 12, 1944, during his 19th mission. His P-51 came under flak over southern France while strafing radar installations. At his interrogation, the German officer possessed detailed intelligence on the 332nd Fighter Group. "The interrogator knew about Ramitelli Airfield, our squadron commanders, even about my parents' home in Detroit," Jefferson recalled. "He knew my father was a teacher and my mother's maiden name. Their intelligence was frighteningly thorough." Inside Stalag Luft 3, Jefferson found himself treated like any other American officer. White POWs from bomber crews often expressed gratitude for the Red Tail escorts. These interactions, impossible in segregated America, happened naturally in German camps, Jefferson noted. "Here I was, in a Nazi prison camp, treated more equally by white Americans than I would be back home." When the war ended and Jefferson returned to the United States, he was immediately subjected to segregation at the disembarkation point. Meanwhile, German pilots reportedly recognized the Red Tail's skill with the nickname Schwarze-Vogelmann, but American bomber crews became their most vocal champions. These men, facing death on every mission, judged nothing by race, only by survival. Bomber crews created their own mythology around the Red Tails. Their distinctive flying style, wing waggles and greeting, tight formations, and refusal to abandon damaged bombers earned them the nickname Red Tail Angels. Statistics supported this reputation. Research by Air Force historian Dr. Daniel Holman revealed that bombers escorted by the 332nd lost only 27 aircraft to enemy fighters, compared to an average of 46 for other P-51 groups in the 15th Air Force. This superior protection rate was achieved despite the Red Tails flying some of the longest and most dangerous missions of the war. By the war's end, the Tuskegee Airmen had compiled a combat record that shattered every pre-war assumption about black military capability. They flew 1,578 combat missions, completing more than 15,000 individual sorties, including 179 bomber escort missions and 311 missions for the 15th Air Force. They destroyed 112 enemy aircraft in aerial combat, and 150 more on the ground. On March 24, 1945, they downed 3 Mi-262 jet fighters in a single engagement. They also destroyed 950 rail cars, trucks, and motor vehicles, 254 locomotives, and the former Italian destroyer Just Missouri, damaged beyond repair on June 25, 1944. Their protection record remained unmatched. Only 27 bombers were lost to enemy fighters under 332nd Escort, versus 46 average for other groups. Individual achievements included Lee Archer with 4 confirmed victories, Joseph Elberry with 4, including 3 FW-190s on July 12, 1944, Edward Toppins with 4, and Clarence Luster with 3 in a single mission on July 18, 1944. Decorations awarded to the 332nd Fighter Group included 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 744 Air Medals, 14 Bronze Stars, 8 Purple Hearts, 3 Distinguished Unit Citations for the 99th Fighter Squadron, and 1 Distinguished Unit Citation for the 332nd Fighter Group. The human cost was steep: 66 pilots killed in action, 32 captured as POWs, and 84 killed in training or non-combat missions. The transformation from mockery to respect was not just about courage. It reflected superior training and technological advantage. Tuskegee pilots flew more hours than white counterparts, 300 versus 200, and practiced formation flying obsessively, knowing discipline would be their edge in combat. The washout rate at Tuskegee was 60% compared to 40% for white cadets. Only the very best survived, creating what Colonel Noel Parrish called a super-selected group. The progression through aircraft types told its own story. The 99th began with hand-me-down P-40 Warhawks, already obsolete in North Africa. These liquid-cooled Allison engine fighters were outmatched by German Bf-109s and FW-190s in nearly every metric. Yet Tuskegee pilots leveraged the P-40's superior turning ability and rugged construction to hold their own. The arrival of P-51 Mustangs in July 1944 transformed the Red Tails into equals of any fighter unit in the war. The North American P-51D Mustang represented American industrial excellence, with a Packard-built Merlin engine reaching a top speed of 437 miles per hour. Its 6.50 caliber machine guns could destroy any aircraft, and its range, over 1,600 miles with drop tanks, allowed bomber escort anywhere in the Reich. Behind every pilot stood dozens of support personnel, mechanics, armorers, and crew chiefs, who kept the Red Tails flying. Of the roughly 16,000 Tuskegee Airmen who served, fewer than 1,000 were pilots. The rest were the unsung heroes making victory possible. Ramitelli Airfield in Italy was primitive compared to other bases, and spare parts were scarce, often placing the 332nd last in line for supplies. Yet their aircraft availability rate matched or exceeded that of white units. These ground crews also faced combat. German raids on Ramitelli were infrequent but lethal. On March 24, 1944, a bombing attack claimed the lives of several support personnel. Even amid the assault, the men continued their work, pulling aircraft away from burning fuel dumps. The strategic bombing campaign over Europe provided the ultimate proving ground for the Tuskegee Airmen. Each B-17 Flying Fortress represented an investment of $238,000 and carried 10 highly trained crew members. Losing a single bomber was a strategic setback, affecting the entire war effort. This reality underscored why bomber protection mattered more than aerial victories. Colonel Davis understood this clearly when he instructed his pilots to resist the temptation to chase enemy fighters. "Anyone can shoot down a fighter if they abandon their posts," he said. "It takes discipline to stay with the bombers while the enemy is fleeing." The Red Tails refined their escort tactics through hard-earned experience. They developed a three-layer defense: close escort weaving directly above the bombers, medium escort positioned to intercept approaching fighters, and high escort scanning for diving attacks. This system demanded precise coordination and absolute discipline. The Tuskegee Airmen were fighting two wars simultaneously, against fascism abroad and racism at home. Their combat record challenged both Nazi ideology and American segregation, proving that excellence in aerial warfare transcended racial boundaries. While they fought the Luftwaffe in Europe, they battled prejudice in the United States. Their victories were celebrated in black newspapers but often ignored or minimized by mainstream press. The Pittsburgh Courier's W. campaign, Victory Against Fascism Abroad and Racism at Home, highlighted the Tuskegee Airmen as prime examples. The contrast with German awareness was striking. By 1945, the Luftwaffe reportedly knew exactly who flew the red-tailed Mustangs, calling them Schwarze. Meanwhile, many white Americans were unaware that black pilots even existed, a deliberate omission. The War Department rarely publicized the Tuskegee Airmen's successes. Victory in Europe brought no celebration, only uncertainty. While white units prepared for parades, the 332nd faced questions about its future. The Army Air Forces planned to maintain segregation despite overwhelming evidence of its absurdity. For decades after World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen's accomplishments remained largely unknown to mainstream America. Individual pilots struggled with this erasure. Lee Archer, credited with 4 victories, worked as an executive but rarely spoke of his wartime record. "Nobody believed me anyway," he said. "A black fighter pilot must be lying." In 1948, President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, integrating the U.S. military, a decision influenced by the Tuskegee Airmen's combat record. Benjamin Davis, who had led the Red Tails over Berlin, became the Air Force's first black general in 1954. Recognition came slowly. In 2007, President George W. Bush awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the Tuskegee Airmen. Only 300 of the original pilots survived to attend, many waiting more than 60 years for national acknowledgement. The transformation from mockery to respect was not mythology. It was documented fact. The numbers remain indisputable: 112 aerial victories against the Luftwaffe, 3 Me-262 jet fighters destroyed in one mission, 150 enemy aircraft destroyed on the ground, 27 bombers lost under 332nd Escort versus 46 average for other groups, and 96 distinguished flying crosses earned by 332nd pilots. The German nickname Schwarze proved that prejudice crumbles when confronted with undeniable skill. Every German fighter destroyed, every bomber protected, every mission completed, reinforced the irrefutable truth: a pilot's skin color had no bearing on his ability to fly and fight. Roscoe Brown, who shot down a German jet over Berlin, summarized their achievement. "We didn't just fight the Germans. We fought ignorance, prejudice, and hatred. And we won all 3 battles." The Tuskegee Airmen did more than win battles, they changed history. They fought 3 wars at once and triumphed in each, defeating the Luftwaffe in combat, challenging Nazi racial ideology through performance, and helping dismantle American segregation through undeniable excellence. When given the opportunity, the Tuskegee Airmen soared, transforming mockery into respect, prejudice into acceptance, and enemies into witnesses of their extraordinary achievement. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. See you in the next video.